Jesus explains the earth, training school for God's children, educational methods, worldly activity, rebirth. Chapter 157, the earth, a training school for the children of God. Cyrenius says to me, the Lord, Lord, I now know from your divine mouth why everything in the world is as it is and happens as it does. And I now understand your divinely wise plans regarding the education of humanity in all ages and in every region of this earth. But I must also confess quite openly that, from an earthly perspective, this Pharisee is fundamentally quite right in his views. This is truly, from Alpha to Omega, not a world of love and truth, but a very wicked world full of hatred, lies, falsehood, and injustice. It could very well be different, but it is as it is and will never change, and the earth is doomed to remain a house of sorrow, and its human children must always languish upon its soil. But it could indeed be different. Say I, yes, it could very well be different, just as it is different on countless other celestial bodies. But then this earth would not have been chosen to be the training ground of those who are destined and called to become my children. Can true, mighty love ever fully reveal itself as such among people who are themselves pure love? What test should one give to those who are already filled with love from birth, to practice patience, humility, and gentleness? But if I had already constituted every human being's nature in such a way that he would stand in the highest perfection from birth without any effort on his part, what kind of practice of life and self-improvement would still be conceivable for him? To what activity could such spirits ultimately be put to use? I will tell you. The trees of the forest and the rocks of the mountains would be far more favored in the self-activity most indispensable to the free life of all than a human being who is already, from birth, completely perfected in every respect. A man who was once physically fully developed and always had a table set before him with the most delicious foods and drinks, so that neither hunger nor thirst could ever be an issue for him, who would also have a magnificent living room, along with all the most perfect mental faculties, the ability to see and hear everything down to the smallest detail, both near and far, as well as to enjoy and continually communicate with everything, and who would never be hindered by even the slightest inconvenience. Such a person would surely hardly ever leave his resting place for a single moment. I tell you, to such a person, even my greatest miracles would be as indifferent as the snow that, in Adam's time, cloaked the mountains in the garment of eternal innocence. Or do you think that even my most infinite, eternal perfection of life would serve any purpose for me, or bring me any bliss? Truly not. My own greatest bliss is felt when I take part in the inner growth of my innumerable imperfect children, and lies in their growing cognition and perfection and resulting activity. I always share their joy over painfully achieved progress, and it is only when my boundless perfection is more and more imitated, and becomes partly visible within them, that it acquires its immense value. You know what I hereby wish to tell you. If it were not so, do you think I would ever have created a world and any living beings upon it? All of this has been an indispensable need of mine since time immemorial, without which an earth would never have been created, and brought to life with all manner of beings. So, let it remain as it is. I have not come to bring peace and a lifeless calm to the earth, but the sword, the struggle in the higher sphere of activity. For it is only in the face of hatred that love becomes a true and living force, and quiet death must flee from it. The hardship that afflicts humanity spurs it into action, and in time makes it patient, gentle, and submissive to my will. If there were no lies with their bitter consequences, what value would the truth have in and of itself? Who lights a lamp during the day, and who appreciates the value of a burning oil lamp while the sun is shining? Chapter 158. Affliction as a means of education. The Lord. Everything that is permitted must therefore exist as a driving force for the betterment of humanity. But every process of becoming presupposes an activity, and this activity presupposes a motive and a lever. The latter, however, must naturally correspond completely to the nature of the activity at all times. Thus, everything that is deemed contrary to moral law, and therefore also evil and bad, must be regarded merely as a permitted lever, and likewise, to the pure, all is pure and good. To the weak and impure, however, it is and must be different, because they still require many such levers of activity. When the children of Abraham, in the times of Moses, Aaron, Joshua, and even under the first judges, enjoyed visible divine guidance, boundless wisdom, and at the same time the greatest earthly prosperity, they became sluggish, like the polyps and oysters on the seabed. I often encouraged and even urged them through the mouth of the prophets to be active and vigilant. But their reply was, if we do something, we might commit a sin, and that would then consume all the good we have done. But if we do nothing, we cannot sin, and will then stand before you, O Lord, as righteous and sinless. Thus they philosophized themselves deeper and deeper into a state of inertia. The consequence of this was increasing hardship, and, in time, physical and finally moral weakness. In that state, they turned to me once more and vowed to live according to the proper order of life. For a time, things went quite well, and they made good progress. But when blessed prosperity, the fruit of their labor, returned, the old dance of indolence began all over again. They were rich in everything and wanted to shine, and they demanded an earthly king as the representative of physical wealth and prosperity. A king was given to them and anointed, but the covenant between king and people was not left unfulfilled. And so, the evil that the people demanded and received was, once again, nothing other than a painful lever for the people towards new and heightened, necessary activity. When, shortly thereafter, the king and the people fell into lethargy, it became necessary to awaken within them external, very threatening-looking enemies in the form of the Philistines, who had become crude and powerful. Then war and many accompanying hardships invaded the land of my people, roused them, made them active, and thereby strong. In the midst of great distress and hardship, they found their way back to me, and grew in grace, wisdom, and prosperity to an almost unimaginable degree. Yet this very prosperity led, even during Solomon's reign, to a sharp decline in their former activity, and the kingdom literally fell into ruin under Solomon's earliest descendants. Thus, this people had to be constantly beset by all manner of misery and hardship, merely to maintain a semblance of activity. Now, in general, it has once again sunk deeply beneath the animal kingdom, especially the priesthood and the teaching class. That is why I have now come in the flesh myself, to cause the greatest embarrassment and confusion to the most sluggish part of the people. And that is why they try to capture and kill me, because they fear that my most active work and activity will rid them of their idleness. But their effort is, of course, in vain. The seed of utter idleness has already taken too deep a root. Therefore, the feeling of idleness must first be taken from them, and they must scatter to the four winds and lead a nomadic life, or join the new covenant of life and activity that I have now established, in which no one will be allowed to keep his hands idle in his lap in order to live. Whoever does not do so will go hungry and thirsty, and will have to wander about in the most worthless and filthy rags, leaning on a beggar's staff, and people will call out to him harshly, "Whoever does not work shall not eat, for every worker is worthy of his wages." And then everyone will strive to be as active as possible. But if anyone nevertheless becomes sluggish and lazy, he will, as an example to many others, immediately begin to bear the rod of discipline. And I tell you, every people that has become sluggish and effeminate will, just as every individual, be made to bear the permanent rod of discipline upon their backs, and will forever have their name erased from the book of life, along with their greatness, power, and prestige. This will make the people increasingly wary, and drive them to many righteous deeds, which will be good. Have you now understood all this well? Chapter 159, the true and false kind of worldly activity. Cyrenius says, "Yes, truly, Lord and Master of eternity. Yet there is one more question, and it is as follows. When people in the most diverse areas of life, who have 1,000 needs, become so active and diligent, then it is also clear that they are slipping too far from the spiritual path of life into purely worldly materialism, and then there can be no more talk of a rebirth of the spirit. Yet at the same time, I have the teaching from your mouth, according to which one should not worry about the progress of earthly life in the manner of the pagans, but should seek, above all, the kingdom of God and His righteousness. Everything else will then follow of its own accord." How does that teaching fit with this new teaching of yours, according to which one should be constantly engaged? See, Lord, I cannot quite manage that. It would therefore be good if you, O Lord, would make this a little clearer to me. Say I, "We still have an hour and a half, and I can indeed answer this question for you. But pay close attention to what I am about to tell you in a parable. Behold, 2 men went to a master of an exceedingly useful and beautiful art. Man A did so to learn the art, so that in time he might earn his own living through it. He studied diligently and paid close attention to everything necessary to master the art, and was finally overjoyed when he received a certificate from the master, stating that he had now fully mastered the art, and was now a master himself. There were certainly still many secrets in the craft of which he knew nothing, but that no longer mattered much to him, for he now had the certificate, through which he would and must be able to earn a good living without great effort. The motive that drove man B to become a master, however, was quite different, and therefore had to have a completely different effect on him. B was not concerned with a livelihood, which he did not even think about, but solely with the art for its own sake. His all-consuming pursuit was simply to become intimately familiar with all the secrets of the art he was learning. But the master, seeing that this student was not at all concerned with bread, but purely with the full knowledge of the divine art, took great delight in him, went to great lengths for him, and thoroughly introduced him to all the possible secrets of the art. And the result was that B, having become a consummate master of the art, produced such an unsurpassed work of art that its fame and praise even reached the ears of a king. and the king then summoned the artist to show him his work as well. The artist did this, however, not for the sake of any hoped-for gain, but to give the king what was surely great joy. When the king then saw the great work of art and was convinced of its utility, he said, "What do you want, great master, that I should do for you? Ask me for a reward, and it shall be yours, along with the privilege that, from now on, you shall remain a favorite of my court, and practice your art here." And the artist spoke, deeply moved by the king's grace. "Most high lord and wisest ruler and sovereign, your grace and your approval of this work of mine are already the highest reward for me. For it was not out of any greed for profit, not even for the sake of my daily bread, but purely out of love for this art that I have learned it with all my strength, truly taking it to heart. And now I have the highest joy and the highest reward, that it has now also found such excellent recognition before the eyes of the wisest king." What do you think the even more delighted king did with the artist in response? "Behold," he said, "now I see that you are a truly accomplished artist in your field. For had you learned this art, magnificent as it is in itself, merely for the sake of merit and bread, you would never have attained such perfection in it. For whoever learns something to advance his career thinks only of that advancement, and is soon content with what he has learned superficially and sparingly. And besides that, he calculates only how he might cover up his lack of knowledge with a false pretense, so that people would not notice his weakness and would still regard him as a great master. In the end, however, this will be of little use to him, for it is precisely his poor and deficient works that will betray him. But you, who have studied art for its own sake, have sought only to penetrate all its secrets, however great and profound they may be. You were concerned with the fullest truth of art, and that is precisely why you have become a rare, true artist whom I can rely on. And since you have not worried until now about bread and livelihood, you shall now receive from me true, greatest, and lasting bread and livelihood. For as king, I always have plenty of positions and the bread and livelihood that come with them for true artists, true scholars, and wise men. There you have the plain and simple explanation of your objection. Chapter 160, The Selfish Seeker of Rebirth. The Lord. The exclusive pursuit of the kingdom of God requires the greatest effort. Once a true disciple has fully embraced this, the king who will reward true merit will surely be found. And so it remains true throughout all the good spheres of human life that, wherever and in whatever a person does, the good and the true for the sake of the good and the true themselves, and strives therein for true perfection, just recognition and merit will and must come to him of their own accord. There is, for example, a man who is committed to achieving the rebirth of the spirit, according to my teaching, which will truly not be denied to anyone who has genuinely strived for it, with all zeal and righteous love. This exemplary man knows that love for God and for one's neighbor is the one and only way to this end. He now strictly keeps all of God's commandments, loves God in his heart as much as possible, does good to all to the best of his ability, and generously supports the poor. And wherever he knows a true man of God, he goes to him, supports him generously, and makes him his friend. He does this for years, yet the promised rebirth of the Spirit, which he hopes for and longs for more and more each day, still has not come to pass. He does notice fleeting moments here and there, but they are merely flashes whose light refuses to endure. Then the man, who has been earnestly seeking spiritual rebirth for years, says, "Now I am beginning to regard the whole business of spiritual rebirth as a mere fable. For 20 full years now, I have done everything the doctrine has ever demanded of me, and yet I stand in the very same spot where I began to live and strive for it. As experience shows, there is nothing to be achieved in this. Therefore, it is wisest for me to continue living as a decent person in the world, and withdraw from all these deceptive spiritual connections." Now here comes the main question. Yes, why could this truly sincere seeker not attain the rebirth of the spirit? Precisely because he did all that was good solely in order to achieve it. Whoever loves God and neighbor for a motive other than loving God for God's sake and neighbor for the neighbor's sake does not attain complete rebirth, because this is the most direct connection between God and man. Through such a motive, a person always erects a barrier, however thin it may be, between himself and God, a barrier that does not allow the spiritual light to pass through. And therefore he cannot become completely one with the Spirit of God. But as long as this union does not take place, there can be no question of complete rebirth. I tell you, every form of self-interest must vanish from the soul, and man must stand completely free. Only then may he achieve that which is highest.